hopefully we'll stay a little bit longer, I guess. I see. Okay. Adoption of the agenda. Any changes you want to make? We want to eliminate one. I think we want to remove one item, right? The selection of officers. We all agree that
we can take it in order and continue it at that point. I suggest that.
Okay.
Great.
That will be fine. Any other changes you want to make?
No.
Okay.
No other changes.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I
Okay, we have
second
motion, we have second. All in favor?
Aye.
that.
Aye. So agenda carries. Approval of draft action minutes of October 10, 2012 regular meeting. Any comments?
I have no comments and no changes.
Okay. Mr. Reinhardt was absent that time.
Right.
Okay. I don't have any comments either, so we're just going to go ahead and...
If we can adopt the agenda, I motion to adopt the agenda.
We did already. This is not approval of the draft action minutes.
I mean, I would...
Okay, we're going to go ahead and make a motion to approve the draft action minutes of October 10th, 2012.
And I second it.
You second it, so all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so moved. Next item is oral communication. At this time, anyone in the audience want to speak before the commission on the items that are not on the tonight's agenda? Anyone? I don't see any hands, so we'll move to the next item, written communications. We got a number of emails before I came, and I didn't get any chance to review that, but I think they're all related to one item, was my understanding. And other than that, we didn't get any other documents this time. So if you can kindly make a copies of that, circulate to this, and if members of the audience, they would like to see that, is that possible?
Yes, I have a couple of extras I can...
You can circulate one on each side so that they can take a look also.
All the emails we received in the last couple of days.
And also there were some this afternoon.
Right. I think there are 8 of them or so.
Yeah. Okay, while he's doing that, we will go on to the old business. And this is the continued public hearing on zoning text amendment RZ 1-13 to amend Brisbane Municipal Code Title 17, Chapter 17.32.220, and it is entitled Grading Permit when required to clarify the circumstances under which grading permits are subject to Planning Commission review, and to establish review criteria upon which the Planning Commission will evaluate grading permit applications. And the applicant is City of Brisbane. I understand that there was quite a bit of discussion in the last meeting. I wasn't here, and that's why this matter is continued. So I'd like to get the staff report first.
Yes, thank you, Honorable Chairman. Again, this was considered at the last meeting. What it is a comprehensive update of the city's grading ordinance, which is actually located in Title 15 of the Municipal Code. There are some provisions in the zoning code that pertain...
Title 15 or Title 17?
The entire ordinance, grading ordinance, is housed in Title 15. There are a couple of provisions that are found in Title 17 that are specific to the Planning Commission's role and authority in reviewing grading, and those were reviewed in some detail at the last meeting. The overall objective of the amendment was, as it pertains to Chapter 17 or Section 17, which is under your purview, was to codify some findings for when you are obligated to review grading. There were no codified findings before, so the idea of what the commissions should be reviewing the plans for when they were evaluating grading. So that was one primary goal. And the other goal was to clarify in which zoning districts that provision should apply. It originally applied to all zoning districts. And the recommendation at the time was to reduce the number of districts that it's applied to, primarily avoiding areas that are either man-made in nature or relatively flat. that the findings related to aesthetics, view blockage, and the retaining walls wouldn't really be very applicable in most cases. And then at the meeting, as you indicated, there was substantial discussion regarding not only the issues that were on the table before the commission, but some things that were not proposed for revision, and that means primarily the cubic yardage that triggers planning commission review, the cubic yardage total of 250 yards. That's a long-standing requirement. It's been in the zoning code for at least the last 20 years or so. Okay. And staff was not proposing any changes to that particular provision. However, at the meeting there was substantial discussion about reducing that threshold down to the point of the idea of even all grading permits should be subject to planning commission review. So the matter was continued to allow staff to do a little more research. There were really three items that we wanted to discuss that came up. One was that 250 cubic yard threshold. As you see, we put together a table just for information for the commission about if that standard were to apply to all grading permits. There's a table in the document that indicates what additional grading permits would have been subject to planning commission review since about 2009 if you were reviewing all grading permits, not just using the 250-yard threshold. And it clearly indicates that you'd be imposing a requirement that does not exist on primarily single-family residential uses and additions of single-family residential uses. As staff pointed out in the staff report, there is kind of a measured approach to regulation that's set forth in the general plan. You have policy 4 that acknowledges the fundamental rights of citizens to freely act and use their own property, except to the extent rules and regulations are necessary for public health and safety and protection of the environment. And policy 5 uses least intrusive rules and regulations consistent with the overall government needs and state and federal laws. Again, that's reflected and embedded in the city's regulations as it pertains primarily to single-family residences and duplexes, which in most cases are not subject to any sort of planning commission review unless there's a variance involved or there are sensitive habitat issues in the acres or ridge tops on the acres. So by virtue of the threshold being dropped to 5 yards, as was discussed the other evening, would be applying regulation to a whole class of actions that are not subject to planning commission review at this particular juncture. So the staff's suggestion, we're not recommending any changes to that 250-yard threshold, and we would certainly suggest the commission consider that threshold in the context of those general plan policies related to having a measured approach toward regulation. Another issue was the applicability of which zones it would be, planning commission review would be subject to. And again, as I indicated, we're talking about excluding the Beatty sub-area, which is where Recology is, the Baylands, Sierra Point, Southeast Bayshore, and Northeast Bayshore. These are all districts that are primarily built out. They're primarily flat. Some are primarily landfill, created landform. And again, the criteria that the Planning Commission will be evaluating grading permits against don't seem to have a lot of applicability in those particular districts, and that's why we're recommending the changes as proposed. Lastly, there were some issues about clearing and grubbing and hoping or requesting that that language be defined a little more precisely. The staff report does propose some changes to the clearing and grubbing definition to make it clear that grubbing will limit removal of stumps and roots. It shall not exceed 18 inches below the original ground surface for purposes of qualifying as grubbing and clearing. So I know there are a lot of concerns that could potentially be a loophole that could allow substantial soil disturbance. So that change has been suggested to address the concerns that were raised at the last meeting. With those comments, staff is recommending adoption of the ordinance as originally presented at the February 14th meeting, modified with that change to the definition of clearing and grubbing. Now let's conclude staff comments unless the city attorney would like to add anything.
No, I think the planning director has covered it very well. This is a comprehensive revision of the entire grading ordinance. And as John said, it comes before you because there's one section in that ordinance that has certain permits subject to planning commission approval, which is also contained in the zoning ordinance, and we can't amend the zoning ordinance without running that amendment through the planning commission. The issues on the grading ordinance will be before the city council, and I guess we would ask the planning commission just to focus on the zoning amendment rather than the technical aspects of the grading ordinance, which will be reviewed by the city council. After you're done with it, it will go up to them.
Thank you very much for excellent report. Any questions for the staff? No, you were here last meeting, right?
I was, and
We were both here.
we were both here.
Let us
So
pick up your concerns.
I just want to go over one last time the areas in which we are supposed to be looking at, and so that we're all on board with that. And those areas are,
The way it reads now, it would be Brisbane Acres,
okay?
Southwest Bay Shore.
No, I meant in the ordinance. There's only a couple of places that we are supposed to be looking at as far as...
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you...
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear.
The section that in the grading ordinance that establishes the need for commission review, again, I don't know what's in your packet, but it's on the ordinance itself, it's page 10, it's section 1501.110.
Okay.
And I guess in your packet it would be G,
No, this is actually
1.19, is that correct?
title and section of the zoning ordinance.
and then the zoning ordinance is, I was looking at the grading ordinance, the zoning ordinance is 1722, 220, which is on, again, page 44 of the ordinance. Here's the packet.
So it's now it's page 1, G1.17, is that correct?
I'm afraid I don't have your packet, so I'll refer to planning director on that.
G.1.8 is the provision to the zoning ordinance, 17.32.220. So G.1.8.
Okay, so this one.
What's your specific questions? You want to find out where this applies? Or
Yeah, you've got a 40-page ordinance here, and really you're only dealing with 3 of those pages out of the whole
Right.
thing. The rest of it is
Yeah.
grading ordinance.
So I just want to make certain that for everyone concerned, all of us, including the people who are going to speak, from the public want to speak, that we are talking about which page. And so it's G1.8. Is that correct? And then the pages have changed.
the old page was H1.14, now it's G1.18, and it says 15.01.0980 permit required. That's the section that we will be concentrating.
As far as I know.
Yeah. That's the only section, right?
17.32.20?
It's 15.01.
That's correct. 15.01.
0980.
15.01.110, Planning Commission Review of Application for Grading Permit, page G.1-18 or 1.18.
Yeah.
And then rolling over to page G-1-19.
1.8 and 1.9. Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just wanted everyone to know exactly what we're going to be looking at.
How about you, Commissioner Reinhardt? Any questions?
No questions. I think it's clear. I think it's the 6 zoning districts that we're talking about. Brisbane Acre, Southwest Bayshore, Central Brisbane, Northeast Ridge, Northwest Bayshore, or the Quarry. So I agree with that, and I think the cubic yardage, I understand why it came up, but I think it should be left as is. I did look up, just curious at what other cities are doing, and they're similar. Some are around 200 cubic yards, some 300, some as low as 100. Like Monterey counties Monterey cities at 100. But we shouldn't have to change our numbers and make it more difficult for the citizens. I think it's...
We should have shared that as a question, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so my question relates to not including the landfill areas like the big projects that are on our horizon. Some people might argue that in that particular instances there might be some problems with the underground soil, which may come under the different areas also, hazardous material and all that. But do we need to consider that fact that landfill areas may still be subject to this?
I think the question would be, or the way to look at it is that any large-scale development, whether it be at Sierra Point or on the Baylands, is going to be subject to its own environmental review process, and grading is going to be part of that sort of larger project that's assessed at any given, when environmental review is done for a project, part of that is going to be the grading. For example, even with the specific plan that will move forward, there will be a conceptual grading plan. So there will be the opportunity for public and planning commission review of an environmental document for a larger project that might occur at the Baylands or Sierra Point. I think the other concern would be that, as we discussed at the last meeting, the Planning Commission's purview under these particular grading provisions are very limited to primarily aesthetics. You're talking about maybe sort of fitting into natural terrain and retaining wall issues. Again, when you're out on the Baylands or Sierra Point, there may be a lot of geotechnical issues that the city engineer will have to deal with, but those really wouldn't be under the Commission's purview or review anyway. So, again, to bring forward...
there might be some concern on the part of the Planning Commission, because planning is also responsible to look at the safety. So if there are serious geotechnical or liquefaction problems, it may come before us too.
Well, that would typically be covered under the CEQA process,
right?
Not
but,
the engineered grading plan. But
yeah. So, any other questions to the staff before we open up the public hearing? Before we do that, what I'd like to do is, would it be too much burden for the staff if you can read in the documents that we received, so that anybody here and the people at home can hear what other citizens have to say about that? So if you kindly read all that for the record.
If I could just summarize, some of these are fairly lengthy, and then they're all available on the record. Someone could come in City Hall, or they'll be on the website posted tomorrow if anybody's curious.
But at least acknowledge the people who have sent the comments, so that we have it in the record that we accepted their comments.
Okay. Do you want the names of?
Yes.
Okay. I have an email from Alina Zavodnik that speaks to the concern about the intent of this proposal may negatively impact the future of mining projects by adding unnecessary time cost to an already stressful and demanding process. So that's one. I have a memo, an email from Bonnie Boswell that please do not change the grading ordinance to make it more difficult and costly to remodel homes. Do not want to discourage our neighbors from making changes to their homes, adding parking or fixing up their homes. We do not want to discourage or delay neighbors from increasing the value of the home, increase the value of the neighborhood and the community as a whole. remodeling can make homes safer, alleviate parking problems, potentially increase property tax and help with schools. So that was from Bonnie Boswell, and then there's another, Lisa Prim, who concurred with the comments in that email. Then you have a lengthy letter from architect Jim Trotter. And again, he goes into some details about remodel projects and that demonstrating that applying these kind of standards or requirements to even minor remodels will clearly add an additional regulatory burden in terms of going through a process that projects otherwise would not have. And he goes into the detail of examples of replacing a front entry staircase, minor landscaping and terracing, proposal to add a carport on a hillside lot, upslope or downslope, would easily require 5 cubic yards of soil remover to complete the work. So again, that's the gist of his comments. A comment from Chris Wires in an email. Heard the Planning Commission considering lowering the 250 cubic yard threshold. Seems to make it more difficult for homeowners to improve their property. We do not support this idea and prefer more incentives for making improvements. C.J. McDonald, I'd like to voice my opinion as a resident and homeowner that the Commission should not increase the regulatory burden. I'm in agreement with staff's recommendations. Joel Diaz, do not change the existing ordinance, difficult enough for homeowners to remodel and fix up homes. Community should be encouraged to do so, not discouraged through additional regulation, fee, and delay. And those are the correspondence I have in front of me. There was correspondence from Dana Dilworth submitted at the February 14th meeting, which was attached to the packet. Okay, most of the comments that were raised in that particular email related to the whole of the grading ordinance, which isn't really under the Commission's purview tonight. Then those comments will be forwarded, as all comments will be forwarded to the Council when they take this up at the appropriate time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if we missed anything, again, we will start with further look into that if anybody's comments are not incorporated at this time in the record. With that, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this subject, and I haven't seen any slip here as to anybody wants to speak before the Commission. But any one of you would like to say a few things, your concerns, you're welcome to do so. This is your opportunity.
Sure. I'd like to concur. Sorry.
You have to come forward, state your name.
This is my first time at one of these things.
Yeah, state your name and city.
Radha Mihaela is my name. I'm a new resident of Brisbane.
Okay.
And thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and live here. I think it's a great place to live. Recently we bought a foreclosure and we have to do some remodeling, and I do feel like this new plan to change the grading proposal would interfere with some of the things that we'd like to do and add to the remodeling costs. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Commissioners, staff, good evening. Luke Bouchard, 242 Monterey. I've got a couple of questions. My understanding of the existing role of the Planning Commission, or one of the roles of the Planning Commission, is when a project does not fit squarely within the well-defined rules as audited or under the purview of the city engineer or city staff. For instance, if a variance is required, I've gone through the process myself. We come before the Planning Commission because it's not something that fits within the box. The Planning Commission can look at the project, look at the merit of changing the rules, or not changing the rules, but offering a variance to the rules for a particular project. Members of the public are welcome to offer comments and so forth. So I think it's common to many forms of government at the municipal, state, federal level, in fact, and elsewhere. Great. What is the compelling reason to even consider taking the grading ordinance with the current rules and maybe amending it so that every project that has any grading to be done would have to come before the Planning Commission? Is there a quick answer to that particular question, or is that, I know I reviewed the packet as best I can, but is there a quick reason why we have to consider such, in my opinion, a drastic change?
I think you have to look at the last meeting's notes. I wasn't here, but there were some concerns from the fellow planning commissioners that, and also John can fill in for that.
Through the chair, and then certainly the commissioners who were present at the last meeting could bring that up or add. My perception was that it was sort of that volume of dirt was an abstraction, that it was hard for people to understand. And then even when you said, well, it's going to fill up the front of the dais, when people go, well, that seems like a lot of earthwork. In this room, it might seem like a lot of earthwork, but again, in the context of a development, and a hillside development, the context was maybe not very clear. So it was one of those abstractions, and that's why we wanted to come back to the commission with a little more concrete sort of context so they'd understand the implications of saying, well, gee, that seems like a lot of work, so we want grading earthwork and we want to review it. So we wanted to kind of give them a little more information about what that meant. I defer to the commissioners who were here last time if they want to add anything more.
There was a discussion about the amount of earthwork and what was the role of the commission in this document, what we should do, what we shouldn't do, what was expected of us, what we should oversee, the role of the city engineer. So there were a lot of questions that needed answering, but one question that was mystifying to us was simply how much land would be moved. Certainly it's not up to us to decide how much land should be moved, so we really wanted to know more. That's why we're here a second night.
And I think it's very important also for the planning commission if they have to, regulate certain portion of the code, so to understand what exactly mean by 250 cubic feet or 10 cubic feet, 10 cubic yard. I mean, so from that point of view, if it was raised, I don't see any reason why not. And I think it's within the purview of the planning commission to really, challenge or discuss any of the requirements that they have in front of them. And if it's 250 cubic feet as a threshold, then as a planning commission, we want to find out why 250 cubic yard, not 10. So that was the reason for bringing this up. Yeah. And that's why we are here discussing this, so that we can make some sense out of that, and at the end of this whole process, we will be able to come up with a very well thought out regulation that can help everybody here in the city.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for
that. So does that answer your question or not?
At least it's the beginning of a better understanding from me of where we're coming from, because somebody who does a project, no matter how big or small, there's already plenty of regulations to be compliant to at all levels of government, right? So there's already well-established, well-written rules. It's already so the economics and the complexity of it already push against anybody who's contemplating any project, right? But at least the rules are written down. And if somebody, before they set out on that project, look at the rules and they go, I think I can stomach this, I can stomach this, I can stomach that, or they come and meet with staff and say, I'm not sure about this before I buy the lot, before I commit to an architect or whatever, what am I getting into? And now we're getting an understanding of that, and then somebody can measure twice and cut once, or at least attempt to measure twice and cut once. What scares me in this, as a property owner myself, is that now we're contemplating changing the rules where even if I understand the box into which my project has to fit, and let's say I happen to be one where a project would have to move 251 yards of dirt today, right? Now I have to come before the Planning Commission, and that's an extra variable. Not that you're troublemakers or anything like that, but it's a little bit of an open-ended, well, we're going to rule as per terms like comfortable and fit, and things that are sort of, comparatively undefined or more fluid, let's say. And I don't want to cast aspersions of malintent on anybody's part, but it opens up uncertainty, right? So you ask any banker what they fear the most, it's not bad rules, it's not knowing what the rules are, right? So when you're about to build something or embark on a building project, not knowing what the rules are and not knowing ahead of time what the bar is going to be set at is a risk that brings uncertainty and therefore extra cost, or maybe would avoid people buying a property or doing, prevent them or scare them away.
Yeah, your concern is very well taken, and that's why we have the public forum here. We like to hear from everyone, and as far as the regulations go, they're continuously going to be changing as the dynamics of the environment, everything changes. So you cannot expect that 10 years ago I bought with this intention that I will be able to move only 100 cubic yards of dirt, and now how come they're requiring me to have 250 cubic yards, and so on. So as a result, what happens is that it's a continuously, the main goal of the regulation is the safety of the people as well as the protecting the environment, among other concerns. And as a result, as we learn more and more, we continuously change it. And before we change it, we have a public forum here where we like to get the information and your comments also before we make a decision. Now, I can agree with you for your frustration when Planning Commission unilaterally decide that we're going to make it 10 cubic yard is the limit. We don't do that, as that's why we have the public hearing here, and I hope you appreciate that.
Yep.
And the knee-jerk reaction on the part, and I see all the time people coming and say, here we go again, we're going to be more burdened with more regulations. We are not. All we're trying to do is we're going to keep up pace with what's going on. And whenever we do something, we like to get your feedback. And we appreciate if you can come and give us your feedback, and we can all work together to come up with something that's acceptable to us as well as you, as well as the community. Community comes first.
Okay. I welcome the fact that you welcome the feedback. Allow me to offer some feedback.
Of course.
Yes.
I believe the threshold of 250 yards as is should remain, and you say that rules and regulations are continuing to evolve. That's okay. There's two different ways in which they can evolve. They can continue to evolve in a well-defined, documented, written, black on white way, keeping it open-ended, saying the Planning Commission is now going to review any grading project. I'm going to word it in a manner that may seem too harsh, but just to drive the point across, I'll take written regulations any day of the week and twice on a Sunday compared to open mic night that might change and affect the value of the property I'm considering to buy. So with that, I want to leave others to offer some comments. A couple of things. When we say, well, the proposed grading be minimized and designed to reflect or fit comfortably with the natural topography, who's going to be the arbiter of comfort here? Because that's not something that I can grasp myself. What may be fitting comfortably to one person may be an eyesore to another.
John, what's your take on this?
This is one of those, as the speakers mentioned, sort of a subjective element of this whole process. When an application comes forward, staff would make some sort of recommendation to the Planning Commission as to how we find or would recommend they find that the project either complies or doesn't comply with that finding. The applicant, the project proponent, would have the opportunity to make their case before the Commission, whoever else wants to offer testimony, and then it would ultimately be for the Commission to weigh the various points of views and perspectives and make a determination. Just for that language in terms of where it comes from, just for everyone's benefit, it comes out of the 1994 general plan. It's specific to some general plan policy language. So it's been sort of a policy that the Planning Commission applied previously.
Let me review it carefully also.
That's 1732-220, item 1. Sorry, 1732-220, sub-item A as an alpha.
I don't know, I have it
That's
here.
on page G as in golf, 1-8 of the packet.
108?
1-8. It's the fourth page from the top of the packet in the electronic version.
You have to understand this is a big packet.
Yes, it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Okay. I got that one, yeah.
The one just below that, will the proposed grading be designed to avoid large exposed retaining walls? Anybody who goes into such a project, the economy of building a retaining wall and the time it takes to put in a retaining wall are self-limiting factors against large retaining walls. What if a project needs a large retaining wall? What then? Are we going to be open to somebody saying, I don't like large retaining walls, they are against my philosophy, therefore the project was not designed to avoid large retaining walls, and I vote it down? I mean, is it as simple as that? Are we a retaining wall free zone, even though there's a mountain that some of us have to build on?
Yeah, I think
there's no one-size-fits-all answer, and I respect that. That's the point, I think. The language, I think, for some of us seems dangerous in that it's opening up this, make it look good. Well, if I get to be the one who decides what looks good, I love that rule, if I'm king for a day. But I'm not, of course, right?
Where did this language come from, John?
Actually, again, I believe that's general plan language.
All 1, 2, 3, all of them?
I believe so. Also, the Planning Commission has, a number of years ago, actually informally adopted some policies for themselves, because, again, you had no guidance, formal guidance, to review grading. So, I mean, it may not seem desirable, but what we had before was no criteria. You just had the commission with the obligation to review grading of 250 yards with not even any kind of guidepost or criteria as to what they're even supposed to look for. And so they adopted some informal guidelines. We're codifying what their practice has been over the last 10 to 12 years.
So I think this is really, really subjective, and I think that this particular section should be revised, in my opinion, because it's all, we don't know what minimize means, what is, large, what is definition of large. So these type of, I personally don't like any kind of nebulous language in the code or guidelines or even the regulations. It should be well defined, and this is not this whole thing, and I agree with you.
And if I may suggest, so the intersection of, so I appreciate the need for where there was not any guidance, to add guidance. I'm all about that because, it's black on white, it's something we can discuss, we can agree, and the rules apply equally to everybody. So the effort going into clear guidance, I think, is a good one. But intersect with that the removal of the threshold of 250 cubic yards. I think a number of the letters that you read into the record, as well as my own opinion on the matter, is I'm not a large real estate developer. I own a lot that I intend to build, hopefully in the next few years, and it's a compliant lot. So there's already an envelope of what is allowable as far as maximum coverage and so forth, and on a lot that's sloped, that may mean a retaining wall. And no one, I think, in my position would try to build a retaining wall that's bigger than what is needed to comply within the box that's allowed on such a lot. So I think there's already, if we leave the threshold where it's at, I think there's already self-limiting factors against somebody building a retaining wall that's 50 feet tall, right? Because if you need such a wall, you're exceeding something in the building envelope, right?
Excuse me, we already have some ordinances on retaining walls in a different section. Is that not correct? It's isn't that in the area where the
this is not well written.
There are that they speak typically to like a fence and a wall.
Right, a fence and a wall.
It's typically a property line condition as opposed to, I think we're talking about something that's structural to accommodate a driveway or even a split-level home or something. We'll look into that, but we can look at that right now, real time, and so we can get back to that.
Again, I think I would welcome well-defined rules, but keep the threshold in place so that there's already a set of well-defined rules under 250 yards, and if 250 yards and above triggers another condition that brings projects before the Planning Commission, that the criteria be well defined there, I think is a good goal, and perhaps some of us would agree that as written, maybe there's some clarification or or more granularity that should be brought to the language. I've got very few comments left.
Very good point, actually. I agree with you, Dave, about this particular section.
My pleasure, thank you. Section 15.01.040, subsection, pardon me,
I'm sorry, 1501.0.0?
15.01.040 on page G as in golf 113.
Okay.
Item 9 as per the new numbering scheme. Item 8 as per the previous numbering scheme. City engineer means the Director of Public Works / City Engineer of the City of Brisbane and his or her duly authorized designees. I think the next sentence is redundant because it just says, the city engineer can delegate duties. Well, we already have designees in the first sentence, so that's a nitpick more than anything else. And forgive me for looking back and forth here. Okay, in section page G as in golf 117, section 15.01.060, subitem A as in alpha. In the event of accidental discovery of prehistoric, historic, or unique archaeological resources. What is that exactly? We won't find any Egyptian artifacts here in Brisbane. If I find...
Let me just suggest, these are sections of the grading ordinance that will go before the City Council, but they're not before the Planning Commission. Your comments may be perfectly legitimate, but it would be helpful if you communicated them to staff before this went on to the City Council, and maybe
very well,
consider them.
Good point.
Okay, very well, I'll do that. The one very last thing is it now allowable to discuss the grading permit inspection fee schedule, or should that be towards the City Council?
Fee schedule is set by the Council.
Okay, very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next, anyone?
Great.
Good evening.
Mike Glenn, number 2 San Diego Court. I have to agree with staff. I would keep the grading requirements. I would not basically have you guys handle grading permits other than what you do now. Brisbane is a unique place, lots of reasons. That's the cliche, I know, but because of the topography and the way things are laid out in Brisbane, it's extremely difficult to do projects, and I've done them. I'm a general engineering contractor. I know I've been pulling grading permits here for 15 years. Just think, and in those 15 years I've seen the progress with regulation, and it's a welcome progress. From runoff, sediment, erosion control, it's not taken lightly like it once was. So I'd like to run through what the process that people typically encounter, and I meet clients sometimes and they want to do an addition or whatnot. First thing, surveyor. Second thing, soils engineer. Third thing, civil engineer for the road improvements. Because Brisbane is unique. Millbury, San Bruno, the roads are generally wide enough.
Right.
In Brisbane, we got to widen them. That's another issue. Civil engineer will deal with the road improvements, erosion control, sub-drainage. We're not done yet. We've got to get a soil, or we have a soils engineer already. Next thing, you get your architect, get your structural engineer. So, as difficult as all these steps are, they're not moving targets. And you could have a project that requires, you could do all this stuff, and then if you're before the Planning Commission, you could have a disgruntled neighbour that could convince the planning commission to try and change something, just to try and appease everyone, try and get everybody to get along, and you guys do a great job of that. You walk a fine line. But even if one did get it passed through the planning commission, city council could intervene thereafter. I actually think it's not something that you guys should bother with. Each and every person that I call out here is licensed. They have obligations. They have peers that keep an eye on them, the city staff. We have our city engineer. I'll give you an example as well. I did 4 hours work in the let me see what it's described as. In the area covered by San Bruno Mountain Habitat. It took me 2 weeks to get a permit. We didn't do any excavation, and it was reviewed by a biologist, another professional. So, I mean, the challenges are tough in Brisbane because our property price, the value of our property does not justify the soft costs and the hard costs of building here. In the last couple of years, things have picked up again. Construction is busy in San Francisco, it's busy in Hillsborough, Burlingame. It's not busy here yet. We have the topography and of Sausalito, but we don't have the property values. So I'm with everybody else. Don't put another layer. There's nothing to fix here. There's regulation aplenty. And if it's a ban on all construction, which I know that's not what you want, because these old houses, they're not getting any sturdier. And just because it's an old house up in Sierra Point survived the last quake doesn't mean it's going to survive this one or the next one. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak before that? Are you have any questions for Mike?
I'll bring this up later.
Okay, who's next?
Actually, in response, the ordinance is 17.32050, fences, hedges, and walls, which discusses the surface of the retaining wall as color, texture. The Community Development Director may approve retaining walls located on any required setback area having a site as defined in Section 17.02.400. Water conservation, non-invasive landscaping of sufficient size. So there's a section that deals with retaining walls. It could be we could, and I don't know what skills, put in the section to refer to in this document where it talks about retaining walls. I don't know if the staff would want to do that, but that's potentially possible.
Okay. Pardon me?
I'd suggest you take some more testimony. We can talk about that at the end of the testimony.
Okay. Any other thing? Okay, Ron.
Well, I'm Ron Davis, and I've lived here 30 years this month, and have worked in this town for 25 years, and relating to property. And I think that this grading change proposal would be real detrimental to our growth and just the well-being of the city. I think we're a nation and a town of rules, and we have rules designed to be fair to everyone. And I think what this does is it creates an atmosphere of, I think you put the nail on the head. The word is nebulous. It creates a haze over the whole process. And what it says to somebody is that you're going to have to fight your way through to get what you want, and that you might not get what your neighbor has because somebody on your block might fight this or that or not like this or the color or this or that or whatever. And that may be a person who fights everything. who has no real business fighting your right to build based on the pre-established rules that are there designed for everyone. So I think that this is really going down a road where you're telling everybody that basically to do anything, you're going to need a variance. So instead of following rules and the whole building code and everything, it's going to be up to you guys and a crowd of people chanting, we want this, we want that. And I don't know that you guys want to spend your time doing that when there's many other things in this town that require your attention, such as developments that should be happening, rather than burning up your time with somebody who wants to build a garage on the side of the hill. So that's my 2 cents.
Very well
Thank
said.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Jerry Cool. I guess my main concern is I'm not really sure what the problem that's trying to be solved by this is. Until we're really clear what that is, I think we're just adding more bureaucracy to it. Even by your own statements in the package, it says it's unclear how this will serve the public interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that should be defined before we get any farther. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay.
2 more minutes. Okay. We were here to continue this public hearing because there are a number of things that may need to be changed, I guess. And I suggest that we should come back again one more time, because I don't think we're going to resolve all of the issues tonight, unless you think otherwise.
Well, I think it'd be helpful then is to clarify, there are a number of issues on the table and which are being pursued or not. Again, for example, the original ordinance, and again, the city attorney can speak to why it's being updated sort of comprehensively. As we discussed the other day, but there were no changes proposed, the 250-yard threshold, for example. That wasn't a proposed change. It sort of came up at the last hearing. We wanted to make sure it was clear that was now under consideration, because staff was not proposing that, and staff is not proposing that. So, for example, if that's no longer on the table, then that's an issue that doesn't warrant any further discussion. If we're down to these kind of the findings, then that's another question. I think there's a real interesting question, though, because if you can standardize what you mean, it's a retaining wall that's more than 6 feet tall or whatever, then in my mind, if there's no subjectivity, then create it as a standard, and I guess if someone can't meet it, they could come to the Planning Commission as a variance. It's philosophically, some of these things are kind of nebulous when you talk about fit and topography. If the Commission's comfortable with some hard and fast language that's very clearly interpretable and doable, that's great. I don't know if it serves the applicants better to have things like a limit on a retaining wall height, and then you just get a variance. I guess if it's under that height, it's allowed, and if it's over that height, it's subject to a variance. The procedure, I think, is intended to recognize there is some subjectivity when you get into projects of a certain scale and size, and they warrant the community's input. But again, that's something we can certainly look at if that's what you want us to do.
Yeah.
I kind of would like to continue with this. I think we have we have our attorney here tonight. I think we have members of the community here tonight. I think we could get a lot of work done tonight. We may not finish it, but I would like to continue discussing this and going through everything we're supposed to look at. I think we could do that tonight.
Okay. The reason I'm saying that is that I think the one member of the audience brought a very good point about Section 17.32.220. That whole section has to be looked at very carefully. When I go through the Brisbane Code, there are a lot of areas where the language is very nebulous, very, very, like, for example, not to block the view of the ridge. And John, you were not here at that time, but we had a long discussion on that, and many planning commission meetings on that. And that type of language, there's so many places in the existing code, and that has to be carefully reviewed and looked at it, and to avoid the extra burden not only on the planning commission, on the community, but also the planning commission review and all that, because it's very difficult to satisfy that requirement. For example, one of the prime ones was be minimized, will the grading be minimized and designed to reflect to fit comfortably with natural topography. How are we going to satisfy anyone with that? That's anybody's guess, right? I may be satisfied, but you may not. So that type of language, I think we should take it out and come up with a little bit more, the description that people can understand and can meet. Because if it's subject to interpretation, then there will be 10,000 interpretation, and we will be reviewing that all the time. So that particular section, I think we should really carefully look at it and try to see what we can do with that. And I suggest that even a lot of other areas in the existing planning, the Brisbane Code, should be looked at it. And when we were doing that, and we dropped it now for a long time with previous planning director, I suggested that to many sections that we have this kind of language, which is not very clear. So we have the opportunity here for this particular one. Let's try to do that.
This is my concern. If we put in a blanket policy on how high the retaining wall is, then we're going to get a lot of people coming before us with variances. When we kind of leave it as a discretion, the whole city is just a bumpy thing. The streets are bumpy. The hills are just all over the place. If we come up with one hard, fast rule on what a retaining wall should look like, then I can see us, every project could come back to us. And I was thinking more that we could take. Have we closed the public hearing? Do we need to close the public?
Well, let's discuss this, and then we can close the public hearing.
I'm more inclined to have a referral back to section 17.32.050, which gives more of the regulations. Just putting in here that to have people refer back to that so that they know it's there, and kind of leave a bit about the retaining walls to the discretion of the engineers, and rather than having every single architectural design that needs a retaining wall that doesn't fit exactly the parameters of what we decide today to come before us.
Well, at least
for a variance.
At least it will make it a little bit more clear to the developer that they have to come before us for that reason. But anyhow, that's a matter of discussion. Let's go with the vote to continue the public hearing, and we will discuss that further. So, are you okay with that, to continue this public hearing, or is there a deadline to finish this?
No, there's no particular deadline.
Okay, so...
I would like to continue just...
So, okay, let's make a motion to do that.
I make a motion that we continue discussing this section tonight, and then if we have some...
You don't need a motion to continue discussing it.
We're not continuing to discuss it. We have to make a motion to continue the public hearing, so that the next time when we come back, the public hearing will continue. So,
I see.
So we have the motion here. You want to make a second? Mr. Reinhardt? Or I'll second it.
I had a question for staff first. I mean, can we resolve this threshold issue and then move forward with the discussion on these other items that they have concerns? So I'd like to move forward and close that, and then move forward with the other.
Yeah, but we still have to continue, motion to continue.
You can carry on. First of all, you haven't closed the public hearing, but you can engage in whatever dialogue this evening you'd like, including direction of staff, taking additional comment from people who are here. And normally when we continue the public hearing, there's been a determination that you're not going to be able to conclude the matter at this meeting. So at that point, you're continuing the public hearing.
Yes.
You want to keep it open to the next meeting. So at this stage of the discussion, you don't need to make that motion. But if you don't finish it tonight and you do want to keep it open for further public comment, then you would adopt a motion to continue the public hearing to whatever later meeting.
The reason I was doing that is because I was going to continue with our discussion on that, and we got all the public's comment at this point. But your approach is very well too, that we can continue that dialogue with the public tonight.
Yeah.
And if we cannot resolve at the end, then we will continue the public hearings.
Let me just offer one other gratuitous comment, and that is you can't quantify everything.
Yes.
And you correctly point out, Mr. Chairman, that in the zoning ordinance there are all sorts of provisions that deal with the exercise of judgment. And that is precisely the function of the Planning Commission. We could go to the ordinance dealing with design permits. We can go to the ordinance dealing with plan development permits. You're going to find language very, very similar to this. And we might try to refine it a bit, maybe add more references, a cross-reference to the retaining wall thing, maybe clarify some of the language, provide additional wiggle room, for example, saying we'll design to avoid, or maybe say, or minimize retaining walls, or refer back to the other section. But I think the point was correctly made also that as soon as you quantify something, you may be trading certainty for process, and you may be creating the need for a variance that didn't otherwise exist. And we have tried in a number of places in the zoning ordinance not to force people to have to get variances, but to leave some discretion on the part of the commission or the zoning administrator or the planning director so that you can exercise the judgment to the convenience of the public who want to build and not to their detriment by imposing new regulations that become, more difficult to meet. But there's some validity to the point of knowing the rules and then designing to it, but that's assuming the rules always work, and if you're not fitting the rules, then the question is, are you going to require someone to get a variance, or are you going to leave kind of a safety valve for a body such as the Planning Commission to modify it without requiring the variance? Variance findings are intended to be difficult to make, and if you require a variance or something like that, you're actually making the problem worse in some respects.
Well, all I was trying to do is make it as simplified and as clear as we can. And in any regulations, it's not possible to have the absolute regulation, no way. But if we may come up with a language such a way that there is some kind of understanding as what we're talking about here. Like, for example, the case in point was they should not obstruct the ridge, view of the ridge. Now, from where, how far, what angle, none of that was defined. As a result, we went through the whole process for 3 months. So similarly here, if you're saying designed to reflect or fit comfortably, what does that mean? So we have to avoid the language that comfortably and that kind of adjectives don't add anything in terms of what we're trying to achieve here. But so that's the kind of language I want to modify here. I don't want to put a specific language, say that any time the retaining wall is more than 6 feet, you come before the Planning Commission. There's no intention here, but trying to make the language such a way that people can understand what we're talking about, what is our concern here. And the way I see it, the Planning Commission concern in terms of the retaining wall is really not the safety of it, which we're trying to do that many times. There's a misunderstanding here. That's the job of the soils engineer and the city engineer. Our job is to reflect the aesthetic, how it's going to look and how it's going to fit in the neighborhood. and which we seem to forget every time, including myself. I say that I've done that many, many times also. So those type of things, if you can clarify what is the role of the Planning Commission here in the review of the retaining walls, it's not that we try to figure out whether it's geotechnically feasible or it's going to be seismically good or not. Our job is to make sure that it fits within the environment, and then we have to give some kind of a parameter of what we're talking about here.
Well, these findings were intended to be aesthetic, and I'm certainly not going to suggest there isn't a better way of stating them, and I think that's our task here, is to work on the language without necessarily talking about a specific number, but there certainly probably is a better way to express what we're trying to accomplish here.
So that's the portion, I think, this whole paragraph, all 5 items, 3 items should be, we should carefully look at it and see if we can come up with a different language. And I also suggest the members of the audience who are here, you can also submit your idea on that can help me formulate this, because ultimately you will be the one that will be looking at this. And it will be really good that we get your feedback also into this.
Well, this is what I see. I see in section 3, it says existing street trees, see section 12.020. I think we could put in something similar to, will the proposed grading be designed to avoid large exposed retaining walls? We could have them go look at the sections that would pertain to that, and that would easily resolve the issue, I believe.
Mm-hmm. You know, what do you mean by large exposed retaining wall? Large is what? Large or 5 feet large? Or
this section 17.
If anything over 6 feet is required, right?
No, this explains quite a bit. So all I'm saying is, to keep things from being too complicated, couldn't we just refer, that section to other sections so that...
Yeah, it can be done. That's one way of...
That would be, I think, solve that problem, kind of elegantly.
Any way to make it clear, that's what we're looking for. And I think that needs some work, and maybe can you...
I think there's maybe 2 different ways of doing that. One is, if we're going to talk about the design standards that are mentioned in the section 32050, there's one thing, because it talks about ways of, basically techniques for minimizing the visual, impact by coloring it and texturing it or breaking it so it's 6-foot blocks or whatever. That's one thing, and that can be referenced or carried over. But to actually apply these standards, they may not really make much of a fit, because we're talking about a height, and we're talking about locations and setbacks, and it's fine if you're basically would be in a position where you wouldn't be looking at walls outside of the setbacks. So you have to be careful what you're reviewing. This other section is something totally different.
Sure.
In terms of more of an exterior edge condition, a property line setback condition versus what might be interior, integral to a structure, for example, you would do in a larger scale grading. But if you want to carry forward some of the design, and you make it, instead of being dismissive or prohibitive, you say that retaining walls shall, include coloring, texturing, architectural treatment, blah, 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 to fit into the neighborhood and the architectural design and the natural environment or something. So you then provide something that's more, all someone has to demonstrate for the applicant, they're going to have to be here anyway, right? Mm-hmm. They're coming to the Planning Commission. They have retaining walls on their project. That tells them something aspirational that they are trying to prove. So, okay, yes, this is how we met this, by doing aspirationally. Yes.
Expose the retaining wall,
exactly.
Not be part of this structure.
Exactly. And so,
and that would pertain
as opposed to being an argument about this is big or this is too tall, or whatever the wording is. This is large, and I don't think this is large, and you think it's large, and so instead of create it that way, is that maybe something that's of more use to the commission?
Could be, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Ron has some feedback to this, Sarah.
Could you? This is an open public.
Our point, I think, is that they shouldn't have to come back to you for any of that, and it should be in the code. This all went through, this is like called deja vu with the articulation of the sides of property in the front, where the same thing came up where they ended up with changing the code so that you had to articulate the walls and certain percentage had to be out and in, so you didn't end up, somebody didn't end up building a box, because probably at some point somebody built a box and everybody went, oh, that's ugly, how do we fix that? And it came to the point where saying, well, we should have design review. And everybody just said, no way, this is not a town for design review. And I think what you're setting yourself up for is kind of a back door of design review, because that's what this feels like. So any building into the hill is going to have large retaining walls. Mm-hmm. So I built a house. I have big retaining walls. I have to put a tree here, a tree there, a tree there. I mean, these guys will tell you, this is what we need, this is what we want. Before we're going to approve this, you got to agree to put a plant here, a tree there, whatever, cover this up, mitigate this, whatever. It's already there. So I still don't understand what all this discussion.
Could I clarify that? Because I can see that it could be confusing. We're only talking about a situation where the grading permit has to come to the commission in the first place. And once it gets to the commission, the issue is, well, all right, how do you make the decision? You have to have some findings. And the discussion so far has been the language of the findings. This is not changing the 250 cubic yard requirement. If you have some grading, and if under the grading ordinance it does not require planning commission approval, you don't get into any of this discussion. This is only if there's a matter that has to go to the commission under the terms of the grading ordinance. Mm-hmm. And then once it gets to the commission, we're trying to provide some guidance for the commission who will review it and make its decision.
If you don't change that limit, then this is all...
Correct.
No. Okay.
I didn't realize that either.
I believe there's two issues. There's a threshold at which the matter is before the Planning Commission. And there may be some discussion about changing the threshold or not. My vote, and I think that section of the peanut gallery would all say, no, don't change it. Second thing, let's say we are before the Planning Commission and somebody is building a retaining wall. And Jane Doe says it's large. John Doe says, the applicant says, no, it's not large. Mm-hmm. I think large, we're going to be wrapped around the axle if we discuss that. Nobody builds a retaining wall bigger than what it has to be as per the recommendation of their certified engineer, because every inch you add to a retaining wall is money coming out of your own pocket. Mm-hmm. That's the limiting factor right there. So I don't think that we should say 5 foot 6 inches and below is not large and above it's large. That's a one-size-fits-all answer that makes no sense. Just like a pair of shoes, buy the shoes that fit your feet. That seems like it's logical. There's no two lots that are the same. You buy a lot, you have a project, there's rules that are absolutes. And one of two things could bring us before the Planning Commission. In the case it's grading that brings us before the Planning Commission, then design us to avoid unnecessarily large retaining walls. Well, if you need such a large wall for that site to build what you're entitled to build as per city regulation, that's the size of the wall that should be there. And if you find an applicant who wants to build a wall twice as large for fun, then visit the issue at that time. But I think
the point here is not the height of the retaining wall. The point here is a bit large, whatever the definition is. The issue here is the static part of that. It's not that that regulation is telling you cannot build. Listen to me first, then you can respond. The issue here is not the size or height of the retaining wall. The issue here is that if it's a large retaining wall, there are concerns regarding how it's going to look. There's a similar thing as articulation. So the Planning Commission here, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make it such a way that it fits in within the neighborhood. So that's where the texture and all of those things come in. Nobody is telling that you cannot build 10-feet high retaining wall, but if you build a 10-feet high retaining wall, it doesn't look like a nice, not an eyesore. There are some on the freeways that the Caltrans builds, and every time you drive by there, you say, what an ugly thing there. That's the main reason for this. But I don't think that Planning Commission has an authority to tell you that you shall not build 8 feet tall retaining wall, as long as the city engineer is okay with that. If he says that structurally is going to be sound, no problem.
So we agree on the common sense basis that should be in there.
Right.
The word that is in there is not beautiful.
Right.
It's not aesthetic. It's, quote, large, end quote.
That's what the problem is.
That applies to
language.
size. So I'm responding to what is being proposed, right? So if bigger is uglier, right, and sometimes it is, and if really it's aesthetics, then the proposal, I believe, Mr. Swiecki, or was it Mr. Topol, suggested perhaps of taking the language that ought to apply in there and copying it into the proposed rules, perhaps would make sense. Anyways, I don't think we'll boil this down tonight, but I was simply suggesting that, and perhaps I misunderstood some of the comments earlier by some of the commissioners, but I don't think anybody's looking for a set of rules regarding fixed size and a one-size-fits-all type regulation.
No.
That would fail. We all agree.
I'm just saying it's not one of those towns.
If the size is the consequence of state-of-the-art design requirements for safety and stability and so forth, then the size of the retaining wall that you have to pay for is the size of the retaining wall you have to pay for, and to make it earning, then some rules apply, but...
Yeah, we went through this in one of the projects in Brisbane Acres, right behind that Virgil Khan's property. There was a person who wanted to build that, and there were a number of issues regarding the aesthetic of that retaining wall. It was a pretty tall retaining wall, and that's where the Planning Commission rules comes in, so that we suggested what need to be done to make it fit within the topography of the area.
I agree with you.
Sometimes you have a need for say very huge retaining wall. There are means to put the steps, so you can have the benches, so make it reduce the impact of that. Those are the things that the Planning Commission is interested in. We're not interested in saying that, and there is no way we can say that the 10-foot retaining wall is unsafe or stuff like that. But we could recommend that instead of having a 10-foot retaining wall, if you have the means to step it into two, is 2-to-1 slope, and you go benches, that's possible way, or any other way to creatively make it look better. And that's where the Planning Commission role is, and I think it's misunderstood that every time you say large means we're going to require you to cut it down.
It's misunderstood, but I understand correctly the proposed rule. The word is large.
Yes.
It's not aesthetic.
It's not properly written here. So.
Okay. Thank you.
But did I clarify what your concern was?
Yes.
Okay.
Now that we're talking about aesthetics of the wall, I want to make a suggestion that if it does come before the Planning Commission, that it is not open for public review. If you do need suggestions on how to make this work other than yourselves, then you go to a peer review. Otherwise, people in the town, everybody's going to be up here, and it's going to be by committee. So that's my suggestion.
Well, that's very difficult to do, because the thing is, in this town, the public likes to get involved. And I don't think democratically we can exclude them, and I think maybe
well, when you're talking, but now you're getting into design review, and that's a whole different subject. If you look at anybody on the peninsula in the city, it is never open for public discussion about any design. It's always a peer review.
That I leave.
So that's a suggestion to look at.
Yeah, that's not my.
It's a suggestion. I'm not saying that you have to vote on it right now. It's just that it really shouldn't be open for public discussion. If that's something you need to address.
Here, and you can convince him.
Unfortunately, it's not open for discussion by us either. We are governed by the State Brown Act, which requires that all meetings of the public agencies, such as the Planning Commission, be open and public. that act gives any member of the public a right to speak on any item that's on the agenda. So if it's on the agenda, a member of the public can speak on it. Now, what you can do is, phrase the matter before the commission in terms of what you're called upon to decide, and request members of the public to limit their comments to that subject. But I think the proposal that John made of changing these findings from being negative to being aspirational is going to make a big difference here in terms of eliminating some of the concerns.
Right. And people get right away and get reaction large. It means, oh my God, I'm going to be required.
I think that's an objection well taken.
Right.
We can try to deal with it.
And I think this whole section should be carefully reviewed and rewritten.
Well, I think that's what we're looking at right now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hang on.
So you're doing so well, if you want to give me some suggestions on concern about the first finding about sitting comfortably with terrain, if I'm again, since you're going to be in the position of having to make these findings, if there's other kind of wording you're looking for, it's brought up several times already, that's what you're trying to do, fit in, right? This grading and this project fits in the best it can. Mm-hmm. But if you have other wording that you're more comfortable with, I'm glad to entertain it. Nothing's really striking me.
Right now, I cannot come up with some things, but I'll think about it and suggest all the other people here, including the...
I do have some, I want to go through them one by one. All the following circumstances are applicable. More than 250 cubic yards of material. Are we going to discuss that or not tonight? Are we comfortable with 250 cubic yards? I think the fact that we've had it 20 years, and that's the question I have. If we change the amount from 250 down, and it's been on the books for 20 years, is there kind of a legal precedent for that? That's one thing I wanted to ask you anyway.
You always have the right to change a standard. There's no legal precedent simply because it's been on the books, but I guess the question I would put to the commission is you make a change when there's some problem that prompts a need for the change.
Right.
And other than some feeling of, gee, this sounds like a lot of dirt, from the staff level, what we can say, and you've got a record of the permits that have been issued, is that we have not perceived a problem of the type that would motivate us to bring a proposed amendment back to the City Council or to the Commission.
Right.
So I guess the position of staff is that this has been on the books, and if it had been causing a problem, we've had plenty of time for that problem to make itself known. And at this point, I'm not aware of any particular problems or concerns that are being generated by that particular standard. And the idea to change it was just kind of a vague feeling, well, this just seems like a lot of dirt, but it certainly was not something that was a reaction to a defined issue or problem that had come before you. Most of the changes we make to the zoning ordinance come from a situation where we find a regulation that doesn't fit, and we determine there's a need to change it. Okay. And I can't really say that in this case.
I think the other part is that most of the other communities, other cities, they are within the same range, 200 to 250, according to the staff's research. So for me, to change it to very little. What was the 10? What was the last meeting?
We were just
5 cubic yards.
We were just really.
So that to me doesn't make any sense. And the reason for this was brought in, as I recall, was because of that one particular instance where the person went ahead and did clear all the shrub over without the permit, and I think that might have something to do with this whole thing. But we are correcting that in the other portion of it, but somehow the Planning Commission may have thought that we can prevent those kind of incidents.
It may be the case. Actually, this ordinance has been in the works much longer than that particular incident that you're referring to came to light. So maybe it's an unhappy coincidence that they kind of came forward in that same sort of time frame, but it wasn't intended to address that issue. That issue would have, again, legally, nothing out there that was done on that particular site was done legally, so it's not like there was a hole in the ordinance. They just didn't follow the ordinance that was in place at the time.
But there was a little loophole regarding the responsibility of the soils engineer. Are we addressing that properly here? That if you're doing the soil exploration, they can create the road and all that, and
the city never conceded that point that was an accurate determination. I think we're getting off track on an individual project, but that's not, that was never a determination.
Since we are doing that, I think we should also take that into account, that any time when there is the grading should also cover that portion of it, that if you're doing the soil exploration work, what are the limitations? And that may not be in in the planning commission purview, but it should be in the grading plan, grading ordinance.
Now that we brought that project up, is that project going to come to us? I was just curious.
If it ever advances to a complete application.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're off the track, and now let's
all right.
back to the
So does anyone have anything about the parcel or number B? We've talked about the 250 cubic yards of material. Does anyone want to make any changes to the section B, the parcel or parcels of land on which grading will be performed is located within the following zoning districts as defined by the city's most current zoning map? We had quite a bit of discussion about that last time, about whether we should include other areas as well. Does anybody...
What are the reasons for the including? What triggered that, do you know?
You mean the original?
No, the originally we have the certain areas that we want that, but...
We were talking about whether we should also include Crocker, because some of the area in Crocker is, perhaps would change the zoning, or...
Are there any areas where there's extensive grading needed in there?
Well, some of it's on habitat.
If something is in the HCP under paragraph 2, it's going to be before you, no matter where it is, as long as it's within the HCP. And that's why we've put in the definition of grubbing, because what does occur up there is weed abatement under the auspices of the fire department and pursuant to a site activity review by the county as the plant administrator. So if you're dealing with any property in the Habitat Conservation Plan area, that is going to be subject to a grading permit, regardless of quantity. So that's paragraph 2.
All right, this is my question. So in Crocker Industrial Park, is there any area that can be built on that has not already been built?
Within Crocker Park, there are no vacant parcels, so you'd be looking at redevelopment of a built parcel.
And that's why that would not be particularly pertain to us. Okay. So the grading, section C, the grading is being performed as part of a project for which an application for a permit, approval, or other land use entitlement is being considered by the Planning Commission as an approving authority for such application. Is everyone happy with this language? I kind of am a little confused by it.
Which page is down there?
This is the G119, number C. The grading is being performed as part of a project.
If I could illustrate...
I'm not really, I never was really clear what that language
If I could illustrate, that would be, for example, out at Sierra Point, we had the biotech campus.
Uh-huh.
That involved more than 250 yards of dirt, correct?
Correct.
So, actually, it wouldn't have mattered, I guess. The point is, if you're reviewing a project and a grading is part of the project, then part of your review of the project as a whole will include grading as an incidental kind of component of that larger project.
Is there a way that we could make this language a little clearer, or it's not necessary to make it clearer, because I didn't actually understand what it meant?
Well, if you had a project where there was no other form of approval that was required by the Planning Commission, then that would really be a matter for the city engineer in terms of issuing a grading permit. I think the intent here is we want to cover certain areas of the city,
right,
such as the districts that are mentioned, and then if you have an application before you, then that also gives you the ability to deal with all aspects of that application, including the grading. And I guess the best example I can use for that one is the Northeast Ridge. When the Unit 2 was processed, the revision for Unit 2 was processed with a collection of different approvals. There was the change in the subdivision map, there was a change in the design permit, but also as part of that group of approvals was the grading permit, and that whole package of things went to the Planning Commission and then the City Council. I think our thought here was that if you're dealing with an application, at that point the grading does become relevant to where the buildings are and how they're positioned on the site and everything else, so you do have the authority to deal with the grading permit as part of that approval process.
Okay.
So that's what it means, is that the grading is part of a project which is before you for some other type of entitlement.
Okay. Are we okay with this language, or
Yeah, I have no problem with you leaving
I'm fine
the
with
way it
that.
is,
Okay.
with 250 cubic yard.
all right?
Yeah.
I think that's established in many communities and here too, so.
Okay, so grading is, number 2 is grading is to be performed on any parcel of land within the boundaries of the HCP, provided, however, review by the Planning Commission shall not be required if the grading operation is to be conducted is weeding or clearing or grubbing. So I think that's fine with me. Is that fine?
That's fine with me.
That's okay.
Sure.
Okay. So the next section is where Planning Commission review of an application for the grading permit is required by subsection. The review shall be based upon a consideration of the following potential impacts. We already discussed number 1, number...
This is a mirror image of the zoning ordinance, so whatever changes we make there would also be made here.
Okay, good.
All right, so where removal of existing trees, is there anything besides that one language that we need to change at this point?
Other than the section that we had a little problem with, which was under grading permit 17.32.3220.
Right.
That has to be rewritten somehow, and
Right.
Just so I'm clear, I understand we'll be rewriting the section about the retaining walls.
yeah, we're
What
going to
about that section 1? Is there some desire to see subsection 1? Will the proposed grading be minimized and designed to reflect or fit comfortably with natural topography?
I think that's fine with me. Is that fine with everyone?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty clear.
That's, the first one is that one, the second one is a little bit...
If you want, I might, again, back to the chair's point previously, words that are kind of polarizing, maybe minimize, I could strike,
Yeah,
will the proposed grading be designed to reflect or fit comfortably?
comfortably is also another word.
But I mean, in a way, that's what you're asking. I want to get rid of minimize, because then you're back to like large. It's, well, you're grading not the minimum, you're grading more than you need to. So that would be my only real suggestion to that.
Well, let's hear from the audience also. I welcome them to come up with their suggestion also, and probably our the short-time attorney can help us with that too, so before he says goodbye, so. Okay.
So I'm fine.
Okay, we'll continue this matter, so we won't vote tonight, so
Now's the time to continue.
now is the time to continue the public hearing, so, may I have the,
So I make a motion that we continue to the public hearing on the subject amendment to grading ordinance in section 17.32.110 of the zoning ordinance.
To,
Great.
specific, March 14th.
To, what, the next meeting? Where it's on the schedule?
March 14th.
would you be ready by then?
You'll be ready?
Okay,
Great.
so March 14th,
I second that motion.
okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion moves. And can we take a couple of minutes,
I don't think you need me.
break?
No.
5 minutes. Actually.
Okay, can we back to work again? Party is over?
Party's over.
The party is just getting started.
Okay, back in order?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we successfully finished the item G tonight, continue for the next meeting. So we move on to the study session now, which has to do with the process for future development application for the southern portion of Southwest Bayshore sub-area, planned for rezoning to multifamily residential R-SWB using form-based codes. Staff, you want to start the discussion on that?
Yes, thank you. So given that this is a study session kind of format, if you want to interrupt even during the presentation, it's about 10 minutes, or we could also take a break at some point and look what's up on the wall. I'll dim the lights a little bit so our person in the audience could also see what's on your screen before you.
I would like to interrupt and say you did a great job with the photography there.
Thank you.
Okay. There's no picture on our screen here.
You don't have a picture?
No, I don't.
Bear with me, sorry.
Check video cable.
Yeah, I have one.
It's the setting.
Check video cable, it says.
It should come through in a minute.
Video cable, check.
Well, it's just drawing anyway.
No picture. We can continue. It's a real good exercise for my neck anyway, so.
Okay. Sorry, it just, the battery went dead here, and it might have been tied to that at the same time we're starting, so,
Hope it was not hybrid, huh?
So the purpose of this study session is to discuss the process for a future development application that's anticipated for the vacant site at 4070 Bayshore Boulevard, and how it relates to the city's obligation for rezoning of this area through the housing element. Actually, it was called for the housing element. So 4070 is shown. It's the very southernmost parcels, except for the triangle parcel, which is 49D, which may also be included as part of that application. We've been talking to the potential applicants about including that and obtaining that parcel as well. So the proposed project provides an opportunity to start the discussion regarding the sub-area and to provide a basis for considering design concepts. By way of background, as you all know, the housing element designated the southern portion of the Southwest Bayshore District for rezoning to multifamily residential. It's currently commercial, mixed use, and all of that is by use permit, so no uses by right except emergency shelters. State law has certain requirements on the potential development of sites that are identified by cities as meeting the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA. This includes a certain number of sites that will be zoned for residential only, as the case is here. For Brisbane, the designated sites to qualify with the state as meeting the lower income categories of the RENA must have, a minimum density requirement of 20 units per acre, minimum site size to accommodate 16 units, and the identified sites must also be allowed to be developed with minimal discretionary review. So it takes away essentially the design permit, use permit process. So form-based codes were identified by the city as the planning tool that would be used to keep control over the future development and that it fits with the fabric of the city. We held a couple introductory sessions a little over a year ago, and due to budgetary constraints, that was held off for now. But as mentioned recently, we've had a prospective applicant that's interested in developing 4070, and the city has an obligation to process their application under the current zoning ordinance. And the applicant has indicated a desire to meet also the housing element parameters of the density, so it would fit essentially both the housing element as well as the current ordinance. The site is roughly an acre, depending on whether you add that triangle piece or not. It's just a little bit more, a little less than an acre there. So staff sees the forthcoming application as an opportunity to help define the district further and essentially to begin to roll out the form-based codes rezoning. Staff has identified some opportunities and constraints for the district and really for the site as well. It's fairly, kind of outline these and we can get into specifics on the sites more later. Many of the parcels, including this 4070 site, have steep topography, which provides design opportunities to take advantage of water views, but also it provides geotechnical and grading constraints. The district is highly visible and comprises a gateway to the city. The district is within the San Bruno Mountain Habitat Conservation Plan, the HCP area, so any development will have to comply with that. Pedestrian and bicycle connections will need to be either provided or maintained. As you all know, I'm sure back in, I think it was 2011, Public Works undertook the bikeway project. So it's a Class 2 bikeway, but pedestrian access through the district is limited. There's essentially a few short segments of sidewalk that have been tied to more recent developments there. There will be a need to aggregate a number of the parcels in the district to meet the minimum site size of it's roughly a half an acre as a minimum, and that would be to meet the 16 units that the state requires, but also at the same time keep the size of a development under the 29 units per acre that's called for currently in the zoning, but also was indicated as an upper limit in the housing element. Traffic impacts. As you're all aware, this is on the highway, essentially the old Bayshore Boulevard as an old highway, and as well we have Caltrain close by and US 101 close by, so there would be, kind of jumping over to noise and air as well. So all those issues, you have traffic off Bayshore, you have noise and air from Bayshore as well as Caltrain and 101. And then consideration of the existing mix of development. One site to note is the VWR site, which is part of the Southeast Bayshore District. VWR has been in the process of relocating outside Brisbane. Yes.
So can you tell us more about that? So at this point, you're thinking of rezoning this to make it develop. This seems I haven't heard of it
Yes,
before.
sorry if let me clarify. So VWR would not be included in this rezoning. I only mention it as a nearby. So you want to consider within the form-based codes both existing mix of development within the district as well as impacts either to or from neighboring properties. And VWR is directly across the street as an older building that's having essentially the business there go away.
Right.
We mentioned this as a possible site for future redevelopment, but we're not planning to rezone that. That would not be part of this. So it's just.
I'll just jump in. The applicant has expressed an interest in looking at a site redevelopment. It's not necessarily something that's sort of hypothetical in the future. It's something they're actually undertaking some preliminary design work on thinking what they might want to redevelop that site as. So something that.
So at some point they might ask for rezoning so that it could be for housing?
I don't think what they're talking about was more on the office model, not housing at that site across. There's not a very, with the proximity to Caltrain, and it's not necessarily a great housing site. At least they've never mentioned the idea of housing on that site, but more of a office complex type development.
Okay. Thank you.
So the access to that VWR site is a little bit further to the north from this district, so I don't know, if you have further intensity with business uses there, it'd be really subject to traffic study, but that's a little bit further away. You may, if VWR site develops higher, you may have some view impacts on Southwest Bayshore. More towards the northern edge or northern end of the new RSWB, we're calling it, district. The southern end, the roadway rises up quite a bit, and so it's quite a distance actually down to the VWR site from there. So just some things to keep in mind as we proceed.
It does not include the Charles Eng property, right?
No, it doesn't include Charles Eng, and it doesn't include the mobile home park.
Yes.
So that the figure up on the screen there shows the red outline is the area that we're talking about. The mobile home park is identified as MHP there, with a black line at the northern edge of that, and then the Eng is just further north from that.
So the Eng property, how much space is that? Is that 1 acre, or is it more than 1 acre?
It's larger than an acre. I don't recall the actual acreage, but it's I want to say it's.
They're thinking of using it as apartment buildings or condominiums?
Condominiums, I think.
Right. It was proposed as a 30-unit condominium complex, and that was approved through the Planning Commission some years ago. Yeah. They just haven't pulled building permits yet.
This particular zone already has quite a few establishments, right? There's a new building being constructed. That's a house or it's a business?
The one under construction at the north end of this district it's a mixed-use project, so it's a business on bottom and residential on top. Also residential existing behind.
Right.
Okay, we still have the propane gas facility there.
That is correct.
That's still going to remain.
Right. So those uses that are there already could continue as a legal non-conforming.
So then how it's going to fit with the form-based code,
Right. So in terms of form-based codes, I'll talk briefly about. We touched on the elements of form-based codes a little over a year ago when we spoke then. The Form-Based Codes Institute defines form-based codes as having certain elements, also optional elements. If you don't include all of the elements, you have essentially what would be considered a hybrid of form-based code, which may be reasonable to use in this case. Often form-based codes
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Form-based codes has essentially a menu of elements that would be used. Regulating plan, for instance, building form standards, public space standards, administration, how the code would be administered, through the permitting process, essentially, glossary. Those kind of elements are considered essentially mandatory, if you will, to be called a true form-based code. But a city doesn't have to actually adopt all of those elements. They don't have to include them in their rezoning. But there's also other optional elements. For instance, landscaping standards are considered within an optional element. In this district, we have a situation where we don't really have public parks. The public space would be the streetscape, which is already within the jurisdiction of the city. That could continue essentially to be handled through the current process. Whereas landscaping, for instance, which is an optional element, would make a lot of sense, I think, to include in the form-based codes, because that really could address how the private development would relate to the streetscape and what you see as you're going by, because this is essentially, it's a gateway district here.
Is there any way, if we do form-based, is there any way we could make some kind of a walking trail that would go connect this area with Brisbane? It seems like it doesn't seem conducive to do that the way it's being discussed because of the land is so tight. But it seems to me that it makes just a lot of sense to make it into a walkway somehow so that it would go into Brisbane.
I mean, are you talking about
the whole area?
I mean, something on the hill, or what are you talking about?
I'm talking about somehow taking the whole region and making some kind of a walking area where it would also be able to join into maybe going up the hill to Brisbane.
I don't know whether that's possible. It's pretty.
I don't know if it's possible, but I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah,
that it would be
thoughts on that. I think one of the keys would be continue as is required currently for any new development that is approved out there, is that a sidewalk be required, and so as those link up, they'd essentially link up to San Bruno Avenue, which it has a narrow sidewalk currently, but it does have a sidewalk there that you could.
It's really narrow.
It is narrow.
Yeah.
And eventually, hopefully, that the sidewalk would possibly continue all the way up Bay Shore to connect to the villages as well.
Right.
So kind of a couple ways there. I think if you're looking at a trail that cuts through the back of the properties and over the mountain, it may run counter possibly to the HCP in the idea of preserving habitat and having, so that would have to go through the county parks and the federal Fish and Wildlife agencies too.
It just seems to me that we are expanding Brisbane quite a bit, and personally, I would like to see somehow a connection between the two areas. Northeast Ridge, it has Crocker Park in the middle, but we've managed to create some trails to connect this the Northeast Ridge with central Brisbane. I would like to see the same thing happen with this area. I think it's pretty important in my mind that different parts of Brisbane be connected and made into a cohesive group. Otherwise,
that's a good point, and I think we'll definitely discuss that.
And if there's a way we could also, even though Crocker Park is industrial, there is an area that is a walking trail behind all the buildings. And if there's any way we could incorporate something that would make it kind of special to people, if there's a way to make it feel like they have access to Brisbane, that they're not just out there. I know that when the Ridge was initially built, I heard, I never felt it personally, that there was people felt separated from Brisbane, or even that Brisbane felt one way and they felt excluded. I never felt that way, but I would, as much as possible, encourage this area to be linked in more than one way to Brisbane, so that there's always a feeling that it's Brisbane.
Yeah. Now, what will be the impact on those existing structures if you're going to come up with a new form-based code here? There are businesses already there. They will be grandfathered out, and because form-based, you want to come up with a certain type of look, right? That's the essential part of it. That the type of structures you're going to have, they create a unique environment, and these structures don't fall into that. Right. They will be grandfathered out, or how are we going to do? One suggestion I make is that maybe you can exclude those out of that zone, because it goes up to a certain point, and then there's nothing beyond that. So that house, that I think that belonged to some architect, that at the extreme southern edge of that, you cut that zone out from there. From that onward is the new zone, because you don't want to mix the old one with the new one. So designate that as a separate zone altogether. This is the one I'm talking about.
Maybe to answer your question about sort of the status if we do implement the rezoning, any existing businesses would be...
Well, be excluded, or maybe you can start the new zone from this point onward. This is the farthest south building, and anything on the north of that can be some other existing zone, but anything beyond that towards south will be all new zone, where you can start with a clean slate. Then you can have the consistent.
What's south of that is essentially just the one site, and it would not address the policies that were stated in the housing element to comply with state law on the RENA. So,
yeah, but there is, if you look at north of that, everything is already built.
Right, and so those buildings would be allowed to continue as legal non-conforming. The ordinance doesn't allow for expansion of those, but
well, I don't know. I mean, that would be my suggestion. But if you have to meet certain state law,
right,
then I guess you can include that. But again, I seem to feel that it will not look uniform. It will be half of it is a hodgepodge, and the other one is the way we trying to make it a more cohesive and.
We definitely need to look at it. You have to look at it kind of as a long-term. Eventually, those businesses or those buildings will sort of outlive their economic usefulness, right? And that's really for that next cycle of development.
Not in Brisbane. But anyhow, that's my suggestion. So if you want to make it the phone code, I mean, the whole district, then there must be some kind of a language in it to grandfather these out, with the exception that if they try to remodel that or demolish and build a new one, then they should follow the new phone code-based criteria.
Right. The concern you raised is a good one, and it was one that was raised as well at City Council when the housing element went for adoption, and so there were definitely concerns, and the city debated this quite a bit in terms of where is the best location, and so I think we do need to look at exceptions and how to tie that in. There's existing code already for legal non-conforming, and so we'll
but if you look at anything south of that, it's very difficult to build. I don't know how. It's maybe an exercise in coming up with this sort of thing, but it's pretty steep. Pretty steep there, as well as there are some landslide problems over there too, for my best of my recollection. Also the highway kind of turns over there, so the traffic visibility issue will be a big one too. So I don't know whether this area is really that suitable for development, but I guess anything can be done.
Yeah, it's interesting because the site in question, as Ken mentioned, at the southerly, is this property where he's been working with someone who has an engineer who's actually starting their preliminary design work. So I wouldn't disagree with you; it's very challenging, but at this point in time, there's a property owner who seems to be very engaged in that process, and you'll be seeing them in the near future.
No, that would be good. If anybody can build it, that's fine. But I hope that will not require extensive grading and all that, because in order to make a road or in order to put a garage over there, you have to have a pretty substantial grading work there. And I don't know whether the engineer is aware of all that or not. Maybe he is.
I'm sure he is.
I have some questions. Are these different properties going to need to give a certain amount towards open space? We talked about that originally last year. I don't know what.
I think that was actually, it was left in the housing element for the Crocker Park proposed rezoning, but removed from this section. If there is a call for within the HCP for 40% habitat preservation as open space, but it's not a parcel by parcel basis. It's the HCP as a whole.
I was wondering if there's a certain areas that could be set aside to have a little park or not. I mean, if we're going to make, is there going to be any attempt to make this kind of a cohesive neighborhood or not, really?
In terms of the property ownership, this is all private property, so
correct.
I think it would be really up to City Council if they wanted to purchase a property to make.
That's what I was wondering, if that...
From what I've seen, their conservation efforts and acquisition efforts have been focused on the acres and some of the more biologically sensitive areas. I think we'd look at the same sort of values, what are the biologically sensitive areas of the southerly site or other sites that would be subject to further development. The part of the problem, and I see and I certainly recognize and support the goal of making sure this is connected as best we can, but it is going to be a very linear. It is a linear sort of feature, a linear element, a linear set of developments.
So one thing I'm proposing is, it is indeed going to be the only space that's going to be connecting Brisbane to this region. Is going to be a little sidewalk. What I'm wondering is if we can make the little sidewalk into as cute a little thing as possible, you know, something with a place of benches and trees and something that will create a sense of Brisbane. You know, they're going to be sitting there looking at a road, and then they're going to be looking at whatever view is going to be left, you know, on the other side. But I think that is what I'd like to see, is instead of open space, if that's all there is, then create the sidewalk area as a really kind of neat little open space.
I think another concern here will be because it's a mixed zone, you allow the businesses also, so the parking will be an issue here. And if you are going to put the parking along with the zone that Ms. Carolyn is talking about, it will be very challenging. And if you look at the neighborhood city, South San Francisco, what they've done is disaster actually, in a way that they put those big, the parking is really, I don't know who suggested that. But if the site was a little bit less steep, you could do something that City of Mountain View has done in Castro area. They have on both sides of the street, they have the nice area for the people to sit down and all that. But this particular area, my biggest concern is the steepness of that. And if you're going to take away the big portion from the bayshore to the uphill, then to build on top of the hill, I don't know.
That's something you raise kind of when you have a challenge site like this, you're really kind of starting to talk about some of the balancing act and some of the trade-offs that might, we'll be discussing as the development moves forward. So the idea you're kind of thinking already sort of starting to identify some of these potential trade-off points and tension points, I think is useful for us to know. It'll be useful when we enter some dialogue and when you have dialogue with this prospective applicant. So, I think that's what we're really trying to do is sort of just set the stage here, do a little brainstorming, come up with, so when we do come up with some real development ideas that we've at least had some preliminary thoughts and some good discussion about it.
Did you do any research to find any such area within California or anywhere else where with this type of topography, where they try to come up with this form-based type of code where you're trying to come up with some consistency in terms of development? I know there are areas that they have done it. Martinez and Benicia, I think, was another one. But I don't know whether anybody will try to attempt in this kind of topography.
Yeah, I have not researched in terms of form-based codes tied to topography. Oftentimes these have been used for kind of town cores and in the case of, I think it's a little rusty with me now, I think it was Miami that did it citywide. So
but Miami is all flat.
Right, yeah, so they don't, but they've essentially applied it citywide.
That was the one too, right? Is it Santa Monica and the Benicia, some east?
Yeah, I believe there was Benicia that we had as an example from a year ago, which would be a hilly one. But even that, they might, I think, it may be that their sites are not quite so steep as these. I had a few last comments on next steps, but I know you have an audience member who wants to speak, so sure, we could come back to that if
Sure.
Thank you for your patience. You had to go through all this other
It's okay.
Yes.
My name is Cheryl Brayton, and I was very interested in this. I called Ken up today because I actually live in this area.
Oh, sure.
And so when I saw the proposal, it presented some interesting concepts, but it also presents some interesting challenges because let me just touch on a couple of things. Like, it is a great area to walk in, but it's almost like it's annexed to Brisbane. There's not a lot of continuity or contiguousness because we're just sort of out there. And if you walk up San Bruno Hill, it's a great cardio workout. But actually one of the unique features about this area, if you look at it, is the green.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, it's a wall that sort of leads up the mountain. And I live actually in a very small cottage directly behind the Roto-Rooter place, so very tucked away and hidden. But that corridor is a huge corridor for when the birds migrate in the early part of the year. Most of the general population isn't going to see it unless they're walking up there. If there was a trail going up there, it's a great place that you could put up some sort of, I've seen this in some of the parks, they have like wooden structures that you can slide in like an 11 by 12 and identify any of the species or any of the native species that would give the public sort of a concept of like what they're living in. Because most people, like I'm a nature docent up at Filoli, most people look at this and they just see green. I can tell you probably 40 plants, when they're blooming, what eats them, and it is a public, it's something that would be interesting to the public and give them a sense of sort of ownership of it if they had access to it.
So are there any trails that are kind of...
No, just as you've all mentioned, that there's a very narrow walkway that goes up there. And you have to be careful because there's the bridge, but if it's so narrow, you're mostly either looking at the ground or wanting to stay so you don't fall off of it. The cars come by there pretty quickly.
So when you go into the area, do you actually have a way that you can go into the mountain area?
No.
There's no way?
No, you just literally go straight up San Bruno Avenue. You can look at it.
There's a Joy Street too that goes to the right?
Yeah, and you can get up there. They're not official trails, but you can get up there and get in. And for example, one of the things that I was telling Ken, I said, there's a red-shouldered hawk breeding pair that come there for the last 8 years, and they nest up in the eucalyptus a little bit off of McLean. You know, there's just like a number of things up there, but it's not readily accessible. And also one of the things that I was thinking of, you've got about only 5 residential structures around here, and they're sort of tucked away. One of the first things that I thought when I heard about this is, I'm going to be caged in. I'm going to have, all of a sudden, an enormous density around me. Whereas one of the things right now that I appreciate it, and you know, I think you could tell, like as a nature docent, like sort of being stuck out here does not bother me. Some people would drive them insane, but this is great, but you're going to have an impact on a very few people, but it will be a definite impact. So in terms of the discussion, like keep these, the green is something that's a wonderful thing to keep there. And how can you sort of incorporate that in, not just landscaping with the people going in, but I am concerned about the parking because these lots on Bayshore, they're not that deep. So if you're going to have the 20 units, where's the parking going to be? Can you widen the sidewalk so you could make it something that they can sort of walk on? Because currently, you don't have that availability there.
Yeah, plus there's a high-speed corridor also. The people go there for 50 miles per hour.
Yeah.
So that's a big concern.
It's like you're going through a small town, you blink and it's gone.
Yeah. And it's like the old Bayshore that used to go through the valley. You know, people have so many concerns we have. But here, my biggest concern is the steepness of the hills and also the unstable soil.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of known.
And then you're going to be revisiting those, what the big discussion was about today, the grading?
Grading, yeah.
The grading and also the the wall.
Retaining wall.
The retaining wall.
Retaining walls.
Huge retaining wall.
Although I don't find any, I was telling Ken, I said, I think I'm around engineers too much at Oracle because that language seems perfectly understandable to me. I don't have a problem with it.
But the thing is that, in my opinion, I think this particular area is not suitable for a form-based code, in my opinion. But it might be the commission, other commissioners have.
I don't think we can turn that around at this point.
Because the thing is that the way the site is, the form-based code means consistency. You're trying to make an area look, certain look to it. And a lot of times it's done in historical areas where you want to create Victorian sets of homes and all that. This area is not that.
No, I think what probably the expected plan is what I mentioned, is what I thought I heard him say, was that as some of the buildings or the businesses outlive their usefulness and some new owner comes in, they see something to take over. But you're going to have to, they're going to be looking for conceptually something that looks familiar.
Right.
And right now it's very diverse. I mean,
Very, very
you've got
diverse.
everything all over the place.
It's like the PG&E trying to get all the poles underground.
Yeah.
There's no way in the world.
Just that particular area is difficult.
But we're still following that particular, so we don't want to get into the same trap here.
So the HCP, this area is actually owned by the state behind it, the HCP, or?
The HCP portions further up the mountain may be owned by the state. I'm not sure what holdings they have, but the HCP is a broad area of the mountain that goes all the way down to Bayshore Boulevard, so it includes Brisbane Acres, private parcels, and this sub-area as well, private parcels. And so with new development, they essentially what happens is there's a biological assessment done, and that's through a company that's familiar with the mountain that's been doing this for years.
Do you think it would be absolutely a horror and a nightmare to actually make some trails in that area so that people can get in and out of the mountain or even climb into Brisbane? I mean, is this something that is going to be just wildly improbable?
Why don't we look at that? I mean, the county has gone through an effort probably about 3 years ago with mapping trailheads through South City and Brisbane, and we can look at that effort and the maps that they produced relative to this sub-district and see if there are any opportunities to provide those kind of linkages. Why don't we look into that?
I just seem to think that would be a way to really unify this area with the mountain, with Brisbane, and and it would just be nice if we could find out.
Sure. How wide is this corridor?
How wide is the district?
Yeah, the width of this.
It's
Wide.
Wide, not the long.
Right.
Right, you're talking about the depth of the individual lots.
Width of depth, yeah.
Right, my recollection is 225 feet. It might be 250.
250, 25 feet?
Right.
So if you're going to take away at least 60 feet for the road and drive, you're going to have some kind of a roadway there to get into, and parking and all that for businesses, then you're left with about 150 feet. Or less. And if 150 feet, how are you going to incorporate the homes on the top of the hill there?
It really depends, I think, on the site and how they handle their drive, whether they have their parking all in front or whether it's integrated and the drive actually winds up the hill. I think this actually goes to kind of the next steps, and it's good to be thinking about this because we anticipate that the owner of the 4070 Bayshore site will be coming forward possibly as early as next month with essentially preliminary drawings to get your feedback on, not an application at this point, but just to get your thoughts on it. So that's kind of a first order item, is to begin to think about those.
But if he's going to come up with that, then we need to have some kind of a guidelines for him in terms of if you want to come up with a phone-based code, then you have to have some kind of a thing to.
That's one thing.
Well, and also if there is a McLean Road in the back, but I understand that that's very difficult to, it has to be 20 feet wide, so that will be very difficult to get access from there, right?
I don't believe they're intending on accessing from the acres, but I don't even know if that's necessarily a public street. Your point's well taken about, an ideal world, we'd have a form-based code adopted, and this applicant would have very high level of certainty in what they're doing, but the reality is we're going to be, in a sense, partnering with them. We're going to be using, I anticipate, their project as kind of a template for what we think makes sense that we would want to replicate when we extend the zoning through the rest of the required district. So we're not in a position to somehow defer this application while we go through
I'm not talking about deferring the application. All I'm talking about is we should come up with some kind of a guidelines, what we're looking for in terms of what is the form-based code that the applicant will be faced with. So are we going to, if we're going to require them to have certain architectural features, then we should decide that, because we cannot wait until he comes and say, I want to build a square home.
I don't think we can put that together in a...
So the current application process, they'll be subject to the current zoning ordinance, and that requires a use permit and a design permit. So the design permit, that's already, the findings that you'll need to make for that are already well established. I think the idea is that as you consider this site, you consider also the rest of Bayshore Boulevard and the rezoning district, and so to think not only of the site but think of the district as a whole. And if you kind of study the photographs up there, you might find some things that you like and that you don't really like. For instance, the newer home that you mentioned there's a landscape, there's the sidewalk there, there's also a landscape buffer, if you will, between the sidewalk and the driveway, which provides a little bit of green. It also provides for some separation for cars to queue off of Bayshore as they're coming on or off, so that they're not backing up traffic. The architecture of that is more of a modern. It has the flat roof, which staff feels actually kind of fits with the mountain in that it doesn't block the green behind it as much as you might get with some other architectural types. So that's, I think, provides some good examples of what might be used. And then as you move further south, you have essentially no sidewalk and a disorganization in terms of how the parking is taken
organized.
taken care of, and so there, except for the most recent, the one that's being developed now, will also have a small landscape buffer and sidewalk, and so.
Again, I make my feeling very well known that this zone is not really good for the form-based code, and the reason is that it's a strange topography over there. That particular house you're talking about is a pretty flat site. It's not that steep hill. So if you want to duplicate that as a model to the other site here, it will be difficult to do. Form-based code is very good when you have a nice flat area where you can have the consistency. But here you don't. That's my opinion, but it might be wrong.
I think I'm sorry, I forgot your name. You had something to say? I have a question. Well, why don't you? We want to hear your question.
Yeah.
Do I understand correctly that the lots that are currently, I can see the new place because I think that's somewhat of a deep lot if that's consistent with like that large squarish building. But some of the other places that are in existence, like some of the warehouses, they're on half lots. So is there any height restriction? I mean, how if they have to have, say, 20 units on like a half lot, and they have to have parking, how does that work?
Yeah.
Are they going to go straight up and go like 6 stories? I mean, do you have a height requirement in them?
There currently is a height limit of 35 feet for this district. Now, this could be open for discussion with the form-based codes, and if the applicant for 4070 wants to or needs to essentially go higher than that in order to achieve the density, they need to do that through a variance and demonstrate then that in that case that it's necessary. And for the district as a whole, that might be something to consider in the form-based codes, is that trade-off between going higher and maybe having a smaller footprint versus keeping it at 35 and maybe having a larger footprint necessary to accomplish the same density.
And if I could, just to make sure we're all really clear, we're not talking about 20 units on a half lot. We're talking a density of 20 units to the acre.
The acre, right.
So, if that requires consolidation of multiple parcels to achieve that lot minimum and the density, so we're not talking about every parcel in its current accommodation, accommodating.
I misspoke. I mean, I understood about the 20 units to the acre, but I'm still thinking like with a smaller footprint, like with a half lot, and I am thinking about the few homes that are right behind them suddenly having like just a big wall in front of you.
Plus, you have to keep the view of the mountain too, so that's part of the municipal code. So if you were going on the trail on the other side, somebody can say that this obstructed the mountain view, so you cannot have a very tall buildings either. So that also we have on the books.
So going back to the half lots, if essentially the minimum size for a development is a little bit over a half an acre to accomplish the 16 units. And so if a lot is too small, it's going to have to be aggregated with other lots to in fact develop it. In terms of right, essentially one selling to another, or if there's a case where a lot line adjustment might accomplish that, I don't know. There's various scenarios to make that happen, but yeah. So the view blockage would be something to also consider, I think, as we get further into the details. And so once we have this applicant come forward with their design work, the preliminary designs, get some feedback from the Planning Commission, they would go back and then do more detailed designs and submit applications and do the technical studies, and then come back to the Planning Commission with the design permit, use permit, and staff would essentially use that work and develop a work program for further rollout of form-based codes for the district as a whole. So it'll be kind of an evolution, if you will, to get this all rolled out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't have any more questions at this point.
Mr. Reinhardt?
I think all my questions are covered. I mean, there's a couple items in the challenges which I'm guessing cover my concerns, which is really like the traffic impacts. Does that include the safety, part of, I'm assuming that includes safety there's a lot of issues that, there's impact of traffic, but,
The big development will require the EIR anyway, so that EIR will cover all of these issues, I think.
With the traffic, I think the use permit that the Planning Commission recently approved for the contractor's yard north of this is a good example where the city engineer actually required that a median be installed, and that just recently was installed to prevent illegal turns. And essentially, it's a safety issue. I think that's going to be something that's likely to be repeated through this district to control traffic, and so there may be.
That's the question, is that a requirement, to do, because as this develops, the impact's going to be greater, of course, of circulation or the flow of traffic.
Like some of the streets may trigger the signal also, like San Bruno Avenue.
Right. So where is that threshold, for that, to look at it more as the entirety of the area instead of just individual parcels, because the solution might change after 3 parcels are developed, versus that one. So I don't know if that's part of the traffic impact, like number 8, or is it part of there's another one that might have been included in. That was it really, maybe number 3, but visibility.
Now, traffic will definitely be one of the concerns, environmental impact, and also the geotechnical concerns, geologic and all that, and HCP concerns. That may be part of EIR, that if it's more than 1 unit, they probably have to do the EIR. So we will be looking at all of those. But my concern is the title form-based code, and I think this doesn't fit in this area, but I don't know if we have to do that,
I think with the form-based code, we can have more than one type of design. I think that, from what I remember, we can have several different types of designs, and then the builder can select which of these designs must suit the topography and their own whim.
But this has to be done before we do anything. So that those 4 or 5 different plans that we want to see have to be in place for it to become a reality as a form-based code. We cannot just do it when the person is coming before us and coming for his own sets of plans.
So unfortunately for this particular first development, it's probably going to be, we are going to be in position of working with that particular property owner to make sure a joint vision, and then we stair step. We use that as a platform to work through the rest of the district, because we are going to have to. That's pretty much, from a timing standpoint, that's really the only way we're going to be able to process if they move forward in a timely way with an application in a way that meets their legal, our legal obligations to process their application.
I wasn't here, so the Ames already have their plan. So do we know what type of would those plans be something that would be we could look at?
That's a good idea. Yeah, we can look at that.
And see if that would be applicable to the form-based codes, because then that could be kind of one of the unifying issues.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting, that the staff may look into different styles of development and see what we can come up with some kind of guidelines for this project, because we don't want to go with nothing in front of us. And also we should set up some kind of guidelines what we're looking for in the form-based, as far as what do we mean by form-based code, so that the applicant should know that we're looking for this, and it should be this way, so that at least it's clear to him, rather than he start the whole process and we say we don't like it. So that's my biggest concern.
My biggest concern is that somehow we
create a sense of unification. I've said this several times, but a sense of community, a sense of belonging. Somehow with Brisbane, a sense of relationship to the green. That's really important. Something that makes a community that would make it something other than just a slum waiting to happen.
Well, that could be one of the criteria, as a part of the form-based code, that we want to have the sense of community by coming up with some kind of ideas. What do you mean by that?
Right.
Well, what I mean by that is you shall develop some trails to connect from this point A to point B and stuff like that.
Or how does the design of the actual building itself kind of invite more of a family-oriented, group instead of, I don't know, I'm not trying to discriminate against single people or, professionals, but if you want to tie it into Brisbane and that family, right,
and all that.
because you can look at different areas that maybe, the people that don't have families don't mind living in that area. They don't feel like they need to be connected as much, but maybe you look at Sausalito, there's a lot of beautiful homes up there with beautiful views that are definitely not connected to the downtown part of Sausalito. And they like that. There's privacy, there's different ways to design that space.
But in this particular case, another challenge is it's a mixed use, so you have to be careful what type of businesses going to move in there. You want a massage parlor, go right in the middle there. That's a main concern. So
I don't see a massage parlor as being a concern, but it depends on what kind of massage parlor.
Depends what
a complementary business to family.
Massage envy is.
So, those are the number of things that are involved here, and that's why I'm saying we're not ready for that, but I don't know.
I think it's going to stay mixed use.
No, it will not stay mixed use.
Or it's going to be multifamily only, but there's areas that are grandfathered in, is that correct?
So there won't be any businesses at the bottom?
No, this district would be residential only, so it differs from the Crocker Park, the proposed rezoning and of the Crocker Park parcels around the community park. That was mixed use, but this would be residential only, and it goes really to meeting the RENA requirements that.
So the existing businesses will be grandfathered out.
I'd say grandfathered in versus grandfathered out. Not forced out, but they can stay.
Grandfathered in, that's what I meant.
Right. Yeah, so there will be businesses, but just...
Well, it's more reason to have some kind of a community feeling there.
It's, how you design that space is going to be a challenge.
Yeah, I really appreciate Ms. Carolyn's concern about that.
Well, I lived up at the Ridge, and I think it was developed so that there would be a lot of area where people could walk. People do walk. There's areas at the Altamar which have little playgrounds in it, and those playgrounds are used by people from other areas of the Ridge. I see people who are walking up on the Crocker Park, the pathway behind the industrial area coming up, and using this area. There is a sense of community, and I think we can effectively do that if we decide we're going to do it, and I think it's important we decide we are going to do that and make that a real commitment right from the start.
It's a very important
And as people's children are going to school there, they're coming down to central Brisbane a lot, and it has developed into a little community, and it should stay that way. Even though it is sort of a suburb of Brisbane, it still has a sense of community, and this will be a sort of little suburb, not a suburb, but something.
But until now, the Ridge is still disconnected from the main Brisbane, other than the road that brings it to the St. Bruno Avenue.
I would say that people feel they're part of Brisbane.
Yeah, they do, but I don't see any in downtown connection yet. but
Yeah, but people way up on top of the hill are seeing themselves as downtown Brisbane. I mean, they're way up there.
the majority of the people that I've seen is they just use the San Bruno Avenue to get to that's why the San Bruno Avenue.
Well, that's your opinion. I happen to live up there. And I think people are proud of themselves up there.
No, I always think that there should be a connection, and I think it's a good point to open up this behind the, before that there was no road, and they used to go through Guadalupe, but at least now they go through the downtown. And I think there should be more of that.
Yeah.
There should be a lot more of that. Anyhow, any other questions? You got enough to digest now, or you want some more discussion on this, or what?
Well, again, the next step will be, we expect the owners of 4070 to come forward fairly soon with preliminary designs, and so really I encourage you to continue to think about it. I don't see that staff will really necessarily be coming back with something on form-based codes. We'll actually work in tandem with, take keen off to some degree the designs that they provide, but also we can research those other architectural styles and bring those forward and talk with.
Yeah, and also think about the trails that are
and the trails
and also the open
connections,
right? Some areas for the people together and all that. So that will be a good starting point, I guess. Anything else?
Not at this point.
Not at this point. Okay, so we're done with this part of it. Next one is the written. Where is my agenda packet? The next item on that will be the item initiated by the staff. Anything that you have that we know?
No, I don't think I have anything. The Bayland GIR, we're looking at toward the end of April possibly for publication, but that's still a little soft date. When I'm a little firmer with that, we'll be revisiting, our schedule for the informational meetings. So,
So it's just continue moving back in April, and then it will be May or June maybe.
I never know.
Okay. Anything from this commission?
Well, I would suggest, considering that the EIR keeps being bumped further and further along, that we incorporate into one of the meetings a little mini review. I mean, we've had several reviews, but, time has passed, and there's a lot of responsibility for the Planning Commission, and we want to do it right.
So sort of another discussion about your role kind of thing, some CEQA?
A little bit. I would think we should probably revisit it.
Okay. We can maybe not the next meeting, maybe the second meeting in March?
Yeah, that might be appropriate.
If it's coming out in April.
Yeah, you want to...
Something, I was thinking something where it's pretty close to where we're going to actually receive the tome and can start setting up meetings, after a few weeks for people to look through it. And so, at that point, I think we have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Any subcommittee meeting updates, Commissioner Reinhardt?
Let's see, the Sustainability Committee, we're finishing off editing one of the last principles, and then, which was from the meeting we had in February 7th. And the next meeting is we're going to start getting into the action items and the metrics to define more clearly how we're going to achieve all the principles. Yeah. That's in our next meeting.
At some point, I'd like one of the person from that group comes and give us a little bit, more details as to which way you're heading.
Sure.
That will be really appreciated.
Can do that.
Okay. And Karen is not here, so we cannot hear from her. And
but I don't think there's an update since...
No, I'm on the BBCAG.
Okay. I'm on the other one. We haven't had another meeting since her last update.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I don't have anything else to add to this. The next item will be selection of officers, and I got a number of emails indicating that we should postpone it until the next meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have any problem with that, so we will revisit that in the next meeting. Okay?
Yes.
And now the last thing is the agenda to the regular meeting of March 14, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
And I entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to adjourn to the meeting on March 14th.
Okay.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So see you on March 14, 2013. And thank you very much for sitting through the whole meeting.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate that.